Hello and welcome to the Blues Kind Show, the show for kind blues. Well, now that the trade and free agency periods are over, I wanted to revisit our list. This is a follow-up to my list depth breakdown from before the player movement period began. So I wanted to have a look at that today, seeing sort of where we stack up. I want to give a couple of disclaimers that I gave previously. This is obviously only my view on the players, as well as some, positional moves that are, a bit of speculation from me. Nothing here is set in stone. The fun of the exercise is, I think, everyone having a go at it, and, look forward to the comments of, oh, you like this guy more than this other guy. Let us know why you, think what you do, and if you've got a problem with anything I've got to say, please let us know. Always fun. So, I've also obviously taken some liberties with how I categorize these players, as I've largely put them into groups to be able to describe ordinary roles on the team. So an example of this might be splitting hairs between, say, high half forward flank and forward pocket. So I've got someone as, say, Frankie Evans as listed as a high half forward, while someone like Jesse Motlop might be listed in the forward pocket. These are not hard and fast. It's more just based on how I observe the roles that they play from week to week. That's how I've categorized them. And this also doesn't mean players don't do multiple roles within games or from week to week due to rotation or whatever else. It's more just where I see a player playing, say, the bulk of their football is where I've listed them. And before I get into the actual depth review itself, I wanted to discuss the table that's next to my head here, because this is the final ins and outs. Now that the trade and free agency and draft periods are all done and dusted. So the first thing that I wanted to note is that we still actually have a list spot. You can see next to Alex Chincotta, there's a gap on the ins side. That's because we have one list spot left over. Chris Davies recently said that we're going to leave that to a train-on spot, which brings me to my second note. Will White and Elijah Hollands have technically been removed from the list, but I've got an asterisk next to their names respectively, because they will be given the opportunity to train with Carlton over the summer with a chance of winning that last list spot available. However, more people might be invited to that opportunity, so we'll see how it all sort of pans out. Outside of the top 4 names on the outs list, I don't really view any of these guys as massive losses. And even that top 4, I don't for other reasons. So no offense to guys like Corey Durden, Orazio, Harry Lemmy, Jackson Binns, Alex Chincotta. I think we can all sort of agree that those guys weren't necessarily taking us forward. And that's not to say that any one of them individually hasn't had good moments or anything like that. It's more, as a collective, I like what we have replaced them with in terms of guys that I think have a bit more upside, can add more to their game and give more to the club. Whereas I feel like those guys from sort of Corey Durden down, probably a bit tapped out. And then there's the top 4 guys. So Charlie, Tom DeConing, Jack Silvani, and Sam Doherty. Doherty, great career, retired. I think he was probably a bit out of juice at the end. Jack Silvani started the season really well, but once again, I wouldn't say he had a great year, given the fact that he missed the second half of it. DeConing was well down, Charlie was well down. So one thing that I think is worth always sort of keeping in mind, you might say, oh, well, we've lost those 4 names. That's such a massive loss. Well, you've only lost their most recent production. It's not that we've had a drop-off from, say, Charlie's 2023 season to now. We have to replace 2025 Charlie, and I think that's a much more doable task. So I'm very bullish on how we can do in 2026. I'll get into an actual prediction maybe in another video, but, just for all intents and purposes, I'd say sort of being able to make finals is a reasonable expectation. And even though we have lost in name guys like Charlie Curnow, Tom DeConing, I'm not even going to say Jack Silvani, frankly, and Sam Doherty, We haven't lost them in the peaks of their careers where they were contributing the most. I know Tom de Koning will go on to have more peak years, but this was not one of them. So ultimately, I feel good about our ability to replace these guys. I'm about to touch on the actual depth chart that I've drawn up myself. I think we are in a much better place than we were before, the player movement period commenced. So I've explained this in my previous depth review video, but for the benefit of anyone new and also to give everyone a reminder, I wanted to quickly go over how I have assessed this, how I have come to the conclusions that I've come to. So I went over how I believe Carlton likes to structure up its teams based on recent years. And that is shown down here at the bottom, with this being the rough breakdown per position of how I think Carlton has tended to structure up game to game. So 2 key defenders, 2 hybrid defenders, 3 general defenders, 5 midfielders, 2 wingers, 1 ruck, 3 high half forwards, 2 forward pockets, 3 key forwards. Adds up to 23 players. So I have then compared these categories to how I have ranked our players based on how I think they fill those roles. I look at number of players in each of those categories. So how many of them I believe are deserving of playing 10 plus games per season, assuming the spot was available to them. So, if you're a very good VFL midfielder, but you can't get into our starting midfield, you might still get counted as a person that is worthy of playing 10 plus games per season. But given the team that we're in, you're not able to break into the spot. So I've assumed if a spot was available for them. I chose this as my cutoff because there's lots of guys who can come in and say pinch hit, and it's much easier to say to a guy, hey, for a month we need you to do a specific role than it is for them to do it over, a 2.5 month period. So I thought this was a good rule of thumb for someone you'd be happy playing a long stretch in the team, and therefore a player that could be used to build out the team's depth. I then compared this to a number of players required at each position as per the depth numbers that I just ran over. The hit rate then shows if we have enough depth at a given spot. Over 100% is considered sufficient, so 101% and higher, because this means we have more players than we would need for a given role. 100% is barely meeting, and if we had injuries, we would be exposed. Under 100% means we literally do not have enough players for the role. Luckily, this time around, we don't have any positions where we don't have sufficient coverage. Again, though, players can play in multiple positions, so there is a little bit of massaging where relevant, and we'll come to those examples in a little bit. Additionally, I just wanted to explain the keys. If a player is in the border of a positional category, so inside this line here, that means I believe they are deserving of 10 plus games. If they're highlighted in this sort of, I want to call it peach, but, sort of orangey yellow sort of colour, like Ollie Hollands is here, that means I believe that they can play a number of positions. There probably are more players that I could select than the 4 that I've gone with, but that we could reasonably expect to see line up in a different position on a week-to-week or couple of weeks basis. I thought this 4 sort of summed it up quite well. And again, players are able to play in multiple positions. So, the last thing that I wanted to touch on is that down here in this row is titled Sufficient Depth, and it goes over whether or not I think our hit rate, which I explained above, is high enough for the position. The row beneath it, pre-draft/trade, is the same question of whether we had sufficient depth, but at that point. And it's very heartwarming to see the dramatic sort of change. So tall backs, we were previously a yes, so no great change there. However, hybrid key defenders, we've gone from barely having the depth needed. So we had 2 guys when I believe we need to have 2 guys, to 3 guys that I now think, are deserving of 10 plus games in a season based on their talent. Just touching on Mitch McGovern there. Not whether or not we like him, not whether or not we think he's taking the team forward. He is an AFL standard player that I think could play 10 or more games, for a club and not be a burden on the team. Not to say that he doesn't have his various shortcomings, but neither here nor there. I've also highlighted him in that sort of, again, orangey yellow colour because I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up playing for us as a key forward. Additionally, general defenders was previously meeting the mark, still is. Midfielders. This is a little bit of a product of previously I wasn't including someone like Adam Chera because I believed that there was a chance that they might be on the move. As a result, him now being included again in the counting statistics means that we have more than enough midfielders to have good comfort around our depth in that part of the ground. Wing is by far the biggest improvement. With it being a clear no before, we had 1 guy that I considered capable of playing 10 plus games, and that was Lucas Camporale. Blake Acres was not included because, again, I thought there was a chance that he might be on the move. And Campbell Chesser, I had actually included in my previous depth review video, but had listed him as a forward pocket because, frankly, I didn't know enough about him. But, in his introductory video to the club, he has said, I'm going to play as a wing, or I've been recruited as a winger. So I think that gives a pretty good indication. He might be worthy of playing 10 plus games a season. I'm not going to pretend I know enough about him in order to give him that sort of a tick of approval. Ruck and high half forward were both previously considered having enough depth. But forward pocket has improved from barely having enough to very comfortably having enough, and the key forwards is still stuck on barely. But once again, we have Mitch McGovern, who I think kind of counts as depth at both ends of the ground, as both a hybrid defender and also playing as a key forward, because he has done that to some success in the year gone by and also earlier in his career. So just at the very global level, I'm very happy to see that this is what our depth looks like going into next year, just across the board at a very global level. There's also parts of the ground, though, that I'm very, very happy with. So where I wanted to start is with hybrid defenders. Previously, if you've watched my last depth review video, I didn't include Harry Dean as a player deserving of 10 plus games. Now, that was obviously well before the draft period had begun. The fact that he ended up going pick 3 in the draft is more than enough to give me the comfort that he could play 10 games in the season. I look back on, I think it was round 1 2023, both Ollie Hollands and Lockie Cowan debuted. And that was a team that obviously went on to make the finals that year. That was a good Carlton team for us. Harry Dean is much better than they were at the same age. I know they play a different position, but he seems more than ready of getting to go straight away. Also, congratulations to him on getting his dad's number 35. And I just wanted to say, congratulations, Billy Wilson, for picking up number 15 from Sam Doherty. I don't really know how that would have gone down in the background. I think that Billy's probably shown a lot of graciousness in that regard. So good for him. I think he gets a really good Carlton number 15. And for Harry, he gets to continue his family connection with the number 35. So I think that's great. I also think that our halfbacks and general defenders will continue to be a really strong point of the team. I couldn't decide if I wanted to include Billy Wilson and Jordan Boyd as guys that deserve 10 plus games in the season. I know Jordan Boyd had a really down year this year, but the year before he was one of our better players. Maybe not one of our better players. Definitely one of our better defenders, though. Especially due to his kicking skills more than anything else. Billy Wilson as well. I was really impressed with him in the last couple of games of the season. I don't think that he showed he's definitely worthy of being in our best 23, but I think he showed a lot of flashes. I really liked his, pace and his ability to follow up in hand pass chains. I thought he showed, some additional talent, some additional attributes that I maybe wasn't certain that he had. I think he could have a future on the list. So hopefully he's, able to get his name on the number 15 locker by getting 100 games up or something. But I say that to say I've only considered of having 5 players who are presently deserving of 10 plus games. Easily could have been 7. Our back line is very well sorted. Midfield, very similar thing. We have one extra. I haven't counted Ben Camperali. He was apparently tipped to debut at the end of last season, but he got rubbed out in the VFL, so that sort of ended his chances there. But he otherwise would have, so he also very well could have been counted. Additionally, anyone who's been watching my videos for a little bit knows how highly I rated Cooper Lord's season. I thought he was absolutely excellent. I think that I even said when we were thinking, when I was thinking that Adam Chera might be on the move, that it's very positive because it means someone like Cooper Lord will get more game time. And I do sort of hope that they continue to play both of them. Jagger speaks for himself. As a starting midfield, rotation contingent, that is a very solid group of 6 names. So I think that there's a lot of upside in terms of the midfield, especially when you also include the fact that our wingers have more depth there than they have had since, I don't even know. I don't remember the last time we had, 3 guys that are competent AFL players that can play on a wing regularly. 2023 was one season. Obviously, Blake Acres had his best season for the club and Ollie Hollands was in his first year, but he showed a bit. So that was probably our peak of wing play in the last handful of years. Prior to then, when we didn't have Blake Acres or Ollie Hollands playing on a wing, I'd love it if someone can put in the comments the last time we had a good wing duo. Rucks. Again, I had Liam Reedy as someone who maybe wasn't worthy of playing 10 plus games. I know that you say you don't want to fall for preseason photos. The man is big, built like a brick shit house. He is goddamn huge. I also gassed on about his waffle performances. I think for a lot of teams, state level form isn't always the best indicator. Ruck it normally is. Not to the same degree. Like you see some people getting crazy numbers like 60 hitouts in a game or something ridiculous. Because of how physical rucking is and how one-on-one rucking is, often the ability to do well at VFL means that you'll be at least competitive and at least competent at AFL level. So I'm very comfortable in saying we have 2 ruckmen that could play 10 plus games if needed. And in addition to that, we have Hudson O'Keefe, who I rate really highly. I'd rather we keep developing him as a forward who's able to back up in the ruck. But, in a pinch, he could definitely get in there. So I think that we're really good in that regard. High half forward hasn't transformed a lot, but it's in terms of the talent that we have and how weak our transition game was last year and also how difficult it was for us to get goals out of our smaller forwards. I think having Zach Williams, Matt Cottrell, Francis Evans and Flynn Young as your first cabs off the rank is really promising. Mainly the top 3 there. No shade on Flynn Young. Good for him. He got an extra year. I think he's, definitely worthy of hanging on for another year and getting a bit more development into him. But just as a starting cohort, Zach Williams, Matt Cottrell and Francis Evans might be one of the stronger parts of our team outside of the midfield. In addition to that, I just want to show what our forward pockets looked like going into the trade period. So we had Jesse Motlop and Ashton Moyer that I had deemed as being good enough to play 10 plus games. Then Fogarty, Durden, Will White, and like I mentioned, Campbell Chesser in the wrong position, but that's since been cleaned up. So even if we are to remove Campbell Chesser and Will White, it's 4 forward pockets listed. 2 of them are worthy of playing at the level for 10 plus games. We've now doubled the number of players at that position. And I would say the two guys that we traded in will instantly become our best forward pockets. I'd say both of them are better than Jesse Motlop. I'm not saying Jesse can't become better than them. I actually quite like Jesse, but just, for round one next year, these are the two guys that I would imagine that we're going with. And they're such an improvement. And finally, key forwards. Hasn't changed since before or after. If we're speaking of ridiculous, prophecies or, guesstimates or however you want to put it for how the season may go, I've been very impressed with seeing Brodie Kemp in the training videos. I know it's only brief. When he re-signed, he said that his main focus was he wanted to add a bit of size so that he could be better in the contest, better in marking contests. I think it is sort of playing that almost Charlie Curnow-esque, slightly undersized key forward, but who's very strong in the one-on-ones. He's got a hell of a lot of athleticism, really good runner, really good in the air. Hasn't been able to put it all together, but Brodie Kemp is someone that I'm very, very high on. Harry, I think, speaks for himself, and Hudson O'Keefe, I was wrapped with his end of the season, and his ability to play backup ruck will, see him go quite far, I think. So, overall, if the only position that we're not really crushing depth is key forward, noting we would also be able to maybe count Mitch McGovern in the depth slot for here as well, I think the way that Nick Austin and Chris Davies and Graham Wright have been able to reshape this list from having so many areas of deficit to being pretty well covered across the board is excellent. I think that the fact that we're now in this position gives us a tremendous amount of luxury in terms of if we decide we want to prioritise the youth and get as many of them into the team to try to fast track, the club's reset, I think you can do that. I think that there is an option because you have so many veteran guys in so many different parts of the ground that if you were to carry a couple of extra young guys along, it wouldn't hurt you in the same way as it did at the end of or the mid part of last year because we were so challenged for depth, one because of the list, but also because of injuries as well. In addition, getting guys like Nick Newman back in the team after a long injury even further means that if you were to happen to carry a younger guy, say Matt Carroll, along in the team, he gets to play alongside a veteran, which is going to only be positive for his development. Personally, I think that this has been a magnificent transformation. I think that sort of to continue on the theme of what I've been talking about in my past few videos, the way that we're going to get better as a team is by having fewer holes. It's not by having, as many bright spots as possible, hoping that they overshadow the difficulties of our team. I think it's the fact that in the cold months of June 2026, and we have a couple of injuries and we have to turn to some of the, guys on our depth, that will actually be able to do it. If Will Haywood goes down with an injury, we have Jesse Motlop and Ashton Moyer behind him, and Lockie Fogarty, and young Taylor Byrne, who we picked up in the 40s in the draft. By the way, congratulations, Taylor. Congratulations, Jack Ison as well. Obviously, I've mentioned Harry Dean. I don't think I need to congratulate him again. Again, in the cold months of June, July, instead of going all the way down the depth to Jordan Boyd, you might only need to go as far as Lockie Cow and Matt Carroll. And all of a sudden, you have so much of a more stable lineup. Because instead of having to go super far down the depth, every part of the ground is reasonably well covered. And I think that's where we're going to see a large improvement over the longitude of the season. The other thing that I think is worth noting is some elements like I mentioned with the forward pockets before, where a guy who was previously the number one rated forward pocket by me, Jesse Motlop, is now actually the third highest rated. There's a number of positions where the number one guy has been pushed out. And that is demonstrative that across the ground, not only are we getting deeper in terms of as the list goes down, but we're getting a bit thicker at the top of each positional group, which is just excellent. I always think of a game I went to with my dad in 2015, and it was I think it was 2015. It was when Carlton lost to Hawthorn by like 150. And in the midfield, they lined up with Jordan Lewis, Sam Mitchell, and Luke Hodge. We lined up with, I want to say it was Murphy, Judd, Carazzo. It was something like that. Not overly important. The point is, in terms of winning the clearance, we had the guys to get it done. Like, their three were excellent players. Our three were excellent at clearances. So we could win that lineup. The problem was, if Andrew Carazzo got the clearance, he'd, kick it to half forward, and it would be something like Grant Birchall on Clem Smith. So what the hell was the point of even winning the clearance? Because they were going to get the ball back so instantly. And what that always makes me think about is how important it is not to have... You don't need to have superstars in every position. You can't have guys that just lose their matchup every single week or every single contest. It becomes way too hard to overcome. But when you look across the depth of the team, you have good faith that there's no massive glaring weaknesses on the team. There could be if we had a slew of injuries in a given position, for example, Key Ford, and you're going with Hudson O'Keefe and Mitch McGovern. Yeah, no, that's probably not going to work very well. But not many clubs can survive slews of injuries at one specific position. But in most places, we either have really good starters in that spot or at least a couple of guys underneath that if they were at a worse club, they'd probably be getting a game. So personally, I think the way that we've been able to, reposition this list on the fly is absolutely excellent. I will come to doing my best team, I think, in another video before the year is out. But based on these numbers and my chart above, you might actually be able to figure out who's in it. So with all of that said, I wanted to put a bow on this and thank everyone for watching. If you like what I'm doing, please give me a like or subscribe. If you want to engage, push back, agree, or give me some more ideas, or if you want to see anything covered, obviously let me know, leave me a comment, or shoot me an email. Thank you everyone for watching, and as always, go Blues!